This is episode number 25 with Carter Good. Welcome to the Doc Fitness Podcast, where it's all about developing your mindset, training and nutritional knowledge so you can lose body fat and build muscle effectively while still living a real life. I am your host, David O'Connor. Now let's get into the show. How are we keeping, guys? And a big welcome back to the Doc Fitness Podcast, and welcome to the very first podcast of 2019. Today I have Carter Good on the show, who is an online coach, and we wanted this episode to be a little bit different in that we're just going to have a general chat about Carter's story today, which you're going to find out about in a minute, which is an incredible story, like on how he lost 145 pounds and just the lessons involved with that to date. And you'll see as well, if you do follow Carter on Instagram, if not, I would highly recommend it. Just the messages he shares and kind of the perspective he gives around things. It's a lot of what we teach here at Doc Fitness as well, and it's exactly why I want to get him on board, because he shares such a good message. And the only other thing I want to say before we dive into this episode is that if I sound a little bit off, it's just that I have been under the weather the last few weeks, and luckily you can't hear my coughing in this episode because I was able to edit the whole thing out, but thankfully we were able to get a nice, clean, crisp episode recorded with Carter, and that's all really. So without further ado, let's get into the show. So, Carter, welcome to the podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, man.
No problem at all. I know we had to reschedule a few times over the Christmas period, but it's officially 2019 we're here, so it's good to have you on board.
Absolutely. We made it through one more year.
We did. And Carter, I start off every single episode with this first question. It puts you in the hot seat, and that is, in 10 seconds or less, what is it that you do?
Okay. Do we have a timer, or am I just winging it? Am I just going to guess 10 seconds?
I'm watching from now. Go.
Okay, good. Okay, I just give free fitness information online, fat loss information, and I coach clients one-on-one online.
Perfect. 9 seconds.
That was pretty terrible. That's pretty bad. It was close enough.
It covers it. And no, I think we're going to get into your story now anyway, but yeah, like, I always create a bit of context behind the guests for people once we start, but I think, like we're chatting off on air before we start, it was, we're going to base this episode around your personal journey, where you've come from and the lessons involved with that. And forgive me now if I'm wrong with the numbers, but I think you've lost over 145 pounds, was it initially, to date? Am I right in saying that?
Yeah.
And like, I think, I'm not sure how long I've definitely been following you over a year and a half, 2 years, I'd say now at this stage, but just, there's so many little lessons along the way that you share with that through your Instagram posts, and I think that obviously there's so much stuff we can go into, but I think it's good to start, Carter, kind of back then, we'll say. Like, what was life like before you lost all that weight? Like, how did you get to that in the first place, we'll say, or maybe, I don't know, pick a place where you'd like to start, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, for sure. And I like to talk about it just because I feel like a lot of times, when people are wanting to make a change, in fitness, and especially when they're trying to lose a lot of weight, it's usually coming from a very unhappy place. And for sure, I had gotten to that point at a period, right, to be able to make the changes I wanted to make. But, funny enough, for most of my life, I never really worried about weight. Like, it wasn't, fun. It wasn't awesome. Like, I kind of wish it would change, but, growing up, I was never incredibly overweight. Whenever I lost weight, that's whenever I had gained a lot of weight. And I'll get into that, later, I'm sure. But, just growing up, from just being a kid up until about high school, I was always just a little bit chubbier, but never anything out of, crazy unhealthy. Like, the doctors never would say, okay, he needs to lose weight or anything. And all of my family, especially the area I'm from, is just, heavier. There's a lot of food, a lot of fried food. It's kind of in the country, so there's a lot of county fairs and stuff. So think like one of the most popular things you're going to get is a fried cheese stick, literally just mozzarella cheese, just fried, and a corn dog kind of shell. So that's kind of what growing up was. And a lot of things were based around food. And and like I said, for me, it was never really an issue until high school. And looking back on it, because it's funny, because you always try to pinpoint what happened in your life that makes a big change. And I go back whenever I was just turning 15, and my parents got a divorce. And that was like my freshman year of high school. And that's whenever I went from, I don't know how many of your listeners like pounds to kilograms, but then they can do the math because I'm terrible at it. I was like 240 pounds whenever that happened. And that's whenever I got up to over 300 pounds and like pretty much under a year. I gained a lot of weight. And thereafter, pretty quickly, found the motivation to actually lose it. And but the funny thing is, I always joke about this. Like, it came from, obviously, I was a high school kid, and there was a girl that I had a crush on, and I got friend zoned. Just the definition of getting friend zoned by this girl. And so like that obviously sparked my motivation to lose weight in the beginning. And then as I started to lose more and more weight, it sort of shifted, because I was like, holy crap, this time it's actually working. And that's sort of what I kept doing until I lost it all. So.
Okay, fantastic. And so that sparked the motivation to get going with it. And how did you know where to start when it came to, we'll say, the diet, the training side of things? Where did you get your information from to start there, we'll say?
Yeah, and just to preface this, it actually goes into something that I think it's something that's really important for people to remember is, even when you hire a coach or hire somebody for help, like, there has to be a period of time, I think, when you are heavily invested in something, mentally or whatever, right? And some people will do that financially, so that forces them to get more invested into it also. But for me, like, at the time, I just spent all of my free time learning, right? Reading bodybuilding.com, getting my hands on whatever I could get to figure out what do I need to do. And, I made a lot of mistakes early on, probably because I didn't have a coach or didn't have anybody working with me. So, I was just trying everything I would ever read. And I eventually found something that stuck with me. It's funny. If you go to bodybuilding.com, I won, like the teen transformation of the year back in 2013. And like, you have to write up a little article about how you did it. And I have my clients go and look at that article just to show them how everybody learns over time, because the advice I give is just miserable advice. It is the worst advice ever. Like, I'm telling people to eat, like, I said something like tilapia, rice, and like beans for like 5 meals, but they were like 200-calorie meals, and then like a handful of almonds, and then like a couple protein shakes. It was horrible. And I even looked at my diet records, because I wasn't tracking calories, or I didn't really know anything about flexible dieting or tracking macros, calories, or anything at this point. I just was eating the foods that this website told me to eat, and I was losing weight. But looking back, I think I figured out, like, I was eating like 1,700 to 1,800 calories a day, and like 210 grams of protein or something, every single day. And I ate the same exact meal every single day. Like, I was very obsessive about it. And I always tell people, one benefit I had for myself was I was a kid in high school, didn't have any responsibilities, no job. I mean, I was just, I didn't play sports. There was school, but obviously high school is not that difficult. Once you get out of high school, once you go home, you can just do whatever you want. So at the time, I just invested all my time into it. And I think that's originally helped me stay successful and stay motivated, and kind of what has grown that passion over time. So.
No, it's good. It sounds very similar to what I did back in the day as well. I just followed. I think I purchased, I won't say any names. I don't even know if these guys still exist online, but remember, I purchased some like PDFs, some training and diet PDFs, and I think the calories were similar. It didn't say them, but when I tot up the numbers in my head, definitely around between 1,700 to 1,800, I'd say. And yeah, same meals every day. I remember I used to be working with guys in the summertime, and they'd be just looking at me sideways with the foods they'd be bringing in, but it was the same stuff every day, 4 or 5 almonds with rice and a bit of chicken. Oh, it makes me cringe when you think about it.
Yeah, for sure. You cut out there for. I kind of got the gist of what you were saying. Like, I think everybody though goes through that period. I think it's important. I think that part of learning, anything in life, but let's just say fitness in general, is, when it does come to the fact that once you sort of embrace the fact that, this is going to be something that you do forever, right? You finally get out of that. Okay, I'm not just losing weight. Like, I'm changing things about me. You have to be okay with the fact that, there's going to be different, things that work for different people. And I always say, there are wins and lessons. And, when you're doing this, you're going to have a lot of wins, obviously, with your fitness goals. But you're going to have a lot of, what might appear to be losses or mistakes. But if you choose to look at those things as like learning experiences, and grow from them, then I think that they're actually a good thing, right? There's just lessons. And so like you probably similar to me, we went through that period where we thought we had to do these things, but then we started to learn, okay, why did that actually work? And that allowed us to make, less strict, more balanced choices in the future.
Yeah, of course. Hindsight it's always a great thing when you're able to look back and see where you did go wrong from it. Like, but I probably personally, it probably took me still another couple of years after I first started experimenting with stuff like that before I really copped on and started to question things, because you'd see some people, you might have had friends you knew that found like they were able to do things easily versus someone who wasn't, and then you were kind of in the middle of that and you're like, right, how come that person's put on a heap of weight and that person's able to keep it off, but they still seem like they're able to enjoy themselves, and you start asking these questions left, right, and center, and we get a lot of those questions from our clients too, especially when they first start. They're like, oh, I follow this person and she's an incredible body, but she seems to be out every second weekend drinking wine and she posts up donuts on Instagram, and how can she do all that? And once they get the education behind it over time, that's fine to understand all that. But yeah, it's a learning experience all the same. We need to understand.
No, for sure. Well, and on social media, and it's part of why I think like IIF, like the whole like if it fits your macros thing has lost some steam. It's still obviously big and popular because it's obviously works, but people just tend to, people post the highlight reel on Instagram, and even me. And I actually this past summer kind of made an effort on my Instagram stories to put like hashtag more of the bore and just like put as many like just boring repetitive meals on as I could, because there was a period where people would say every time you post you're drinking wine or you're eating like a brownie or something. I'm like, well, listen, that's like happening 10%, 15% of the time, right? I mean, or of my calories. Most of the time I'm eating these boring foods. And so that's whenever I started doing that more. But no, you're right. It's something that you learn. And even, and I think it's for me, like getting to that point, and maybe why I sort of, I didn't go through years and years of like crazy restriction or like, not eating certain foods, was because I didn't have people around me that were doing that too. Like I think a lot of times people make friends in the gym or with other fitness people. And so like they all kind of do the same thing. Like all my friends were still going out to Wendy's, right? And they were still going to go to parties and do all this. And so for me, it was literally, I mean, that's why I always talk about after I lost weight, those were some of like the more unhappy years of my life, like more so than whenever I was over 300 pounds. And it's because I just felt like such an outcast because I had these two goals and I didn't know how they could work with one another. Like how was I going to have my fitness goals and my social goals? And that's what really made me start to learn more and more about it, because really it just came out of like feeling helpless and like needing to figure out a solution because I knew I couldn't sustain what I was doing for the rest of my life. And
Carter, when you say that you went to 300 pounds, did that happen in high school or was it after? Like
yes. No, I was going to say that happened whenever I was, that was whenever my parents got a divorce. That was like my first year of high school. So like grade 9. I'm not sure if like, I know our school systems are a little bit different, but like the school right before college. So like my first year of that school, that's whenever I gained like 70 pounds. But then I actually was at my heaviest weight for about 6 months, and then I started losing weight. So I didn't like hang out at 300 for too terribly long.
Yeah. And I'm sensing a couple of factors at play there from it. Like number one, probably environment. Like there was so much more food available to you versus probably available to me when I was in the equivalent to your high school, because like I got a bus to school, bus home, we ate on site, and those meals were kind of standardized every day. But we were super active at break time, that kind of stuff as well. And I was always an active kid myself, because things didn't like I never put on an awful amount of weight, but I put on a little bit. So in college. But I can imagine that if I had access to a lot more stuff, probably through high school and college, for example, that I would have definitely put on, I'd say 20 to 40 more pounds easily at the flick of a switch. Like, so would you say that a lot of that was down to environment and probably a bit from your parents splitting up as well?
Oh, absolutely. And for me, it actually wasn't a change in school environment. The main problem was, so I was like 15, I guess I should change the age, 15 and a half. So at that age, where I'm from, you get your permit to drive. So you can like drive with a parent. And so at that time, my parents got divorced, and I was living with my mom. And me and my mom at that time kind of grew closer. Like one of the things that we bonded on was going to eat at this Mexican restaurant. We would do it like 6 times a week. Like that was like 5 minutes from my house because I wanted to drive there, and like we wanted to go together. We would go there and just eat tons of chips and salsa, right? And so that added up. And then once I actually got my license at 16, I had total freedom. And for a while, I mean, there was a period of time where like I would, have my normal breakfast, or I actually would never really eat breakfast. I would have school lunch, but then between going home from school and having dinner, I would like drive to Taco Bell or McDonald's and just like eat, probably like 1,000 calories of fast food or more. And so that, obviously added up. So it was just an extra meal that I added on to whatever else my family was eating. And that's clearly, at the time, what caused a lot of my weight gain to happen. I also really started to get into different video games at the time. Like there's this one video game I'm sure you've heard of. It's called World of Warcraft. Yeah. And I got crazy into that game. And honestly, like I'm still like a fantasy buff. Like I love Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter. So it's still one of my favorite things. But like I got so into that game and like played it for 12 hours a day. So that in combination with just having total access to whatever I wanted to eat, obviously that's what made it pretty easy to put on, 70 pounds of body fat in a relatively short amount of time. So
yeah, so like excess calories coming in, activity going down, recipe for weight gain. Really.
It always comes back to that. Like, because everyone always says, eat less, move more. Like, and the thing is that's true. Like, at a fundamental level, like it's always about energy. I mean, it's obviously not that simple. There's a lot that goes into that. But if somebody's, struggling in some way, their body, they're not creating the deficit that they need to see the results that they're wanting to see in a certain amount of time. That takes the same thing with gaining weight. You're not just going to start gaining weight if nothing at all changes. Usually when people start to gain weight like that, you see a big life change. Like the popular things that happens to like athletes in high school, like as soon as they get to college and they are no longer, playing whatever sport they were playing in high school, or now they're in university, like they are stopped. They have a lot more access to food, right? Because there's a food hall, but then they're moving less. They don't have practice every day after school. Like they lost that 2 hours of activity that they were having every single day, and they replaced it with like more beer and food, right? And so, that's something that I think is really important, is just being self-aware of that. Because the more people can because a lot of people play a victim, right? Like, I don't know how I gained 25 pounds. And it's like, okay, well, first off, it's not necessarily your fault. I mean, it's very easy. We live in an environment where it can happen very easily, but it's all important to understand why it actually happened, because it wasn't just like fairy dust. Like I'm a very big on like being real with yourself and being honest, even if it's brutally honest sometimes. Because that's really, I think, how you make changes is through knowing what happened, why it happened, and accepting it, and then being able to move forward from that. And so I know that's a little bit off topic of my story, but I think that's, for me, what has always made a big difference. And when I look back on things, when the biggest changes happened for me in my health and fitness specifically, but even other areas of life, has been whenever I've like analyzed the situation and like took responsibility for it and said, listen, like maybe I'm in an environment where this could have happened, but I'm, at the end of the day, I was still making those choices, and the only person who can make the better choices is also going to be me. And the more I play the victim of it, the worse it's going to get. And so, obviously a much easier said than done type of thinking, but I am a big believer in being as honest with yourself as possible, and being realistic about why things happened and how you can make changes for them.
No, 100%. And don't think that it is completely irrelevant what you're saying, because again, we're tying all this back into your story overall, because it's nice to see kind of, the habits and the life you were living back then to when you gain weight, to what changed, and to where you're at now, because it all ties in, of course. And even one thing I had in my head as well is that to show people like you said, 12 hours a day of World of Warcraft. It sounds like a crazy amount, but one thing that I remember I used to play was, I still do play it, Call of Duty, Modern Warfare.
Oh yeah, I was there too.
Yeah.
Modern Warfare 1 or 2?
Modern Warfare 2 was probably the best Call of Duty game there is, I think, anyway.
Okay, yeah. I like this one. I like Call of Duty 4. That was like, I think it's mostly because of the nostalgia.
Yeah. Like I actually bought one for this Christmas just to play it while I was at home. I bought the PS4 online membership as well, just for a month. But besides that point though, like when you look at the for people to put that into perspective, if you look at the stats of when I used to play Modern Warfare, it told you your total time spent on the game, and you're not talking hours, you're talking months, and it shows you on the screen.
Oh, yeah.
You have spent 26 days and 12 hours playing this game, and your mouth just drops. You're like, what? I've spent that many. You spent a month of your life playing it over the summer, for example. Like, so no, it helps tie things into perspective too. That right, yeah, okay, Carter wasn't as active as he is now back then, but I think activity, while we're on that topic, like general activity, like just being on your feet, walking around more, taking stairs, stuff, that kind of crack. Like it's something that we're bringing up a lot more with our own personal members outside the gym, because of the fact that it accounts for a massive part of your energy burn every single day. Like if you look at it compared to, I think it's like roughly. It's between 10-15%, I think, of your total energy burn daily compared to what you do in the gym.
It's a lot.
Yeah, which like the gym is like 5% or something like that. Yeah, I think those are the rough kind of guideline numbers. But yeah, I'm sure we'll get to that again a little bit further. But I want to kind of continue on from where we're at now. So you said you did the bodybuilding competition. You lost. Well, did you lose the initial weight during that competition, or?
Yeah. So it wasn't a competition. It was just like an online, like transformation kind of competition. So like, I just submitted my results or whatever, through bodybuilding.com, and then like they selected me. But no, at that time, that wasn't the leanest I'd ever gotten. I think I went from like 305 down to like 185 for that transformation. I eventually at one point got down to like 158, 160. Which was like really, I'm 6 foot, and I didn't have a lot of muscle. I kind of just looked like a skeleton, honestly. So I was very, very lean at that point. So
you literally halved yourself.
Yeah. At one point, it was pretty much like that.
Wow.
Like 300, yeah, because it was like 140, 160, yeah. So what was that? Yeah, 300 to 150. Yeah, it's like 145. So yeah, almost half. Yeah.
Wow. And when did the kind of flip switch then, when you started to understand, energy deficit, energy surplus for gaining weight, training in the gym, that kind of stuff? When did you get a coach? How did you get on the kind of, we'll say, the proper track with things, we'll say?
Yeah, it all honestly just came from like just self interest, right? And like my senior year of high school all the way through like my sophomore year of college, I didn't do anything, right? That's kind of part of the period of time whenever I was like struggling socially, but because I had so much free time, because I wasn't going out and hanging out with friends on the weekend or doing anything like that, I was, sitting in my dorm room, just like reading. And like I started to it started with like YouTubers, and different like vloggers, and then it shifted more into like research stuff. And I got really into, spending out on Aragon, who has like a research review, like 3DMJ, which is like more bodybuilding people, but I liked their information just because it was very science based, and that got me more into like other nutrition. And I started like buying books and reading those. So really, honestly, it just came from like whenever I had free time, like I would watch nutrition videos and exercise videos and just want to like learn more about all that stuff.
Yeah, I think though, like for someone like yourself who is a coach helping tons of people online as well, I think that passion obviously came out back then, probably without you even noticing it. Like, and again, like I'm realizing so many similarities with myself back when I was kind of started learning all this stuff as well. I came across the same people, came across the same kind of sciencey stuff, started dipping my toes into research and that kind of crack. I remember when I read my first scientific paper, I was like, what the hell am I doing? Didn't know how to read it, but these guys used to be able to break it down and make you understand it a little bit better, and I know there's more people that come out of the woodwork over time that produce unbelievable information, but that obviously led you to becoming a coach and where you're at now as well. So obviously if everyone did that, it would be fine, but that's not where we live at in the real world. People are not as passionate about things as myself or yourself. But how many years would you say it's been since high school to now, or high school to put on the weight, to losing it, to understanding what to do right? How long would you say that journey took?
Oh man, I'd say probably at least 3 years, 3.5 years, 4 years. Granted, it wasn't like a clear direction of learning it. It was a lot of, like turns and mistakes along the way and all that. But I would say probably, 3.5 years until I finally started to actually, started to click, and I started to learn more about like the actual science and of fat loss and all of that, and understanding, why does, and even like making connections to like, okay, why does Weight Watchers work? Well, because it does XXX, creates this calorie deficit. People start making better food choices. It gives you this recommendation that, and you start to learn more and more. Oh, okay, that's why all these things work. Why does low carb work? Okay, well, because, people tend to eat whenever they're eating carby foods, it tends to be very high calorie foods also, right? And so when you switch, and they also start to make better food choices when they're on the diet because they're being more self-aware. Like that was really the switch, was, and it's also what has sort of, because I went through the whole, I think everyone's probably done this, where they've gone through like a zealot stage of like saying my way or the highway. But it's why I have even taken a step back and like, I have a client who is like 100%, she's like she's like lower carb vegan, which is very difficult to do. Now, she obviously, we talk about like making sure that she's taking certain things, but she loves doing it. She enjoys it. She does it for ethical reasons. She never feels, and if she feels great doing it and like her blood work's good, like there's no reason not to do it if it's working for her, right? Because she's still satisfying the things that we need to satisfy to get her the results that she's after physically too.
Yes, of course. Well, but 3 years as well is not, it doesn't sound like a long time, because for some people, that 3 years could have been 10 years before they made a change. Because like you said a few minutes ago as well, like you were at a stage in your life where you took responsibility for your actions and choices over time, and then the kind of flip switch from there, and the snowball effect came from losing the weight, and that kind of catapulted to where you're at now. So I suppose one thing that I wanted to bring you on as well, with it being January 2019, Carter, is after talking about all that kind of stuff, like if you had somebody who was in your position where you first started, we'll say, where would they start?
Man, so I guess it really does. Would you say somebody who's like in my position, like with where I was at exactly?
Yeah, well, not even that it's exactly there, but similar, we'll say. Doesn't have to be exact, but somebody who is struggling with their weight and struggling with what to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would. It's always hard. It's always hard not knowing the exact context, but I tend to find that people who are so let's say somebody who's like borderline obese, right, very overweight, doesn't exercise at all, and eating a lot. I honestly think that the best thing that they can do is start with exercise, and not even with like necessarily, obviously, like doing intense. Like I'm talking like walking. Right? Kind of going back to what we talked about of just being a more actively minded person, like taking the stairs, avoiding the convenient stuff, trying to like get up and move and do that. Just because, it's the difference between like exercise and nutrition. Like we're obviously, I would say that nutrition is probably the most, is going to be the most important thing for getting results, and it's definitely maintaining results in the long run. Just because it's so easy to overeat the activity that you're doing if you're not thinking about it. But in the beginning, because nutrition is the hardest thing to change. Like exercise is like an additive habit, whereas nutrition is like a changeative habit. So with exercise, you're either going to go for the walk or you're not going to go for the walk, right? It's not like there's like any other choices. Whereas with nutrition, every single meal you have to choose: am I going to eat this healthy food or that healthy food, this food or that food? And so I just think that if you can just start building consistency with being more active, first off, you're probably going to start seeing some results. It's obviously not going to be the only thing that you have to do. But then I think, you get that one win underneath your belt. Then I would advise that person, okay, let's start to focus more on nutrition. And even then, I probably do as much. My focus is always like, what's the least amount that we do to get the most results possible, essentially. Like what's because that'll help them not, getting with overwhelmed. And if they can not get overwhelmed and start to build up those wins over time, I think that's what leads to extraordinary results in the long run. So.
100%. Yeah, no, like your line of thinking is exactly the way we try and portray things here as well. And like even one of our ladies there before it was back in October, I think it was. She's been with us over a year, and she was just saying how she's her 3 to 4 sessions in the gym now nailed down. She's happy with that. She's consistent with that. And she was like, I want to start doing a bit of cardio. And I think she said that she had an all exercise bike at home that she'd like to start doing just because she enjoyed it before and whatnot. And we were saying, yeah, of course, let's go for it. And I got her to let me know what her plan was with her first. What was she thinking about it? And she said, right, I'm going to do it for 30 minutes every single day. And then I was just kind of waiting for her to say something else, and she just stopped and looked at me, and I was just kind of like, do you think that's going to be sustainable going forward? And she just kind of looked at me and she was kind of like, yeah, I don't think so. And literally got her to bring that 7-day target in her head down to 1 day, and we even got her to do it for 10 minutes one day and see how that goes and try and catapult that on then from there. And I think today, like, she's added in 1 or 2 like 30-minute bike sessions a week because she enjoys doing it at home when she can outside the gym. But again, like, it's like you said, the smallest change bringing the maximum return. Like, obviously, if somebody hasn't done anything gym based in their life, or if they haven't done that in 5 to 10 years, starting with super small activity things like small little wins that they can add on to over time, that's a perfect starting point for them. Or it's the same principle though if you had somebody who maybe they played a sport when they were younger, maybe they do go to the gym, but you know, they go for 5 or 6 weeks and they're off for 8 or 9 weeks. It's the same principle with them. They're probably taking on too much. So, you know, if 4 or 5 days in the gym is a target that you've done before, why not do 2? Why not start with 3 and see how that goes from there? Because, like you said, I couldn't agree. It's a principle. Yeah, it's a principle that you add on to over time. And just to build on that, then, Carter, with the nutritional side, like, is it the same principle? Like starting small, building up. Obviously, you have the education.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, and just the kind of like, because I think they both are the same. Like, it's always about, you have to remember, like, with fitness, like I always say, you know, fitness is very simple. It's just not easy, right? And it's not easy because of all the consistency part and the mindset part and all of this, and that's why, you know, it's better to be in a situation where you are kind of getting antsy because you feel like you could almost do more, than to be in a situation where you're constantly stressed out because you can't keep up with what you have in your plan. That's why whenever you were just talking about the client that you had who's the biking thing, like, you know, getting her down to that 1 day, she thought 1 day a week, 10 minutes was like way too little. And I would say that's probably a good mindset to be in. If you're constantly in the state, like, you could do a little bit more, but you don't, because you know that, you know, maybe you could push harder for 3 months, but then what happens in 6 months? What happens in 2 years? Like, you know, you can over time and get there eventually. And in nutrition, I think it's the same. Like, one of the things I love for people to do, I'm a huge fan of tracking nutrition, but I'll work with people, and maybe our first goal will be, you know what, we're just going to start tracking our nutrition. Like, that's all I want you to do. And I don't want you to, if you feel like in the moment you need to you could make a better food choice, do it, but don't let that stress you out. And, like, don't feel ashamed of whatever you're eating, you know, and I will send them, like, my food log back whenever I was, you know, over 300 pounds, and say, listen, you know, we've all been there. Most people are not eating nutritiously, so don't stress about that. Just log it and track it to get them in the habit of just, because you have to think about what you're eating and then maybe we'll start adding in habits from there, or maybe we might start tracking something. But it goes back to the same principle of just creating small changes that are very winnable to build up confidence, so that you can make more and more changes with more confidence. And it's, you know, that's the secret of success, is just like staying confident. And it's funny how you can even talk about it. Like, me and you, obviously, we're very aware of how important that is. But even we still need that for ourselves. Like, we still have to treat ourselves in that same way and say, like, we need to build up our own wins, or we're not going to want to do something either, because everyone's the same. You know, we all have very similar tendencies in that. And so, I would just say with exercise and nutrition, my biggest thing is always, you know, start as small as you can to stay as consistent. And I think that works for everybody. I think it's important for anyone, even if someone who's super motivated is like, you know, maybe they can push a little bit harder, but still being very mindful of the fact that motivation is fleeting. And just because they're crazy motivated right now doesn't mean they're going to be motivated in 3 months. And I would rather them have a plan that they feel confident in rather than motivated by, because if they're confident in doing it, they'll do it whether they're motivated or not.
Yeah. Something hit a chord there at me a second ago. You said, what was it about? I think the stress of worrying about doing X amount of workouts, or the stress of knowing I have to hit this amount of workouts that week, something around those lines. But if I use myself back in November of last year, I changed my workout structure from, I used to have like four big sessions across the week, and then I'd leave an extra day where, kind of like an optional day. Now the thing is, I always hit that optional day. and it was kind of, obviously I that was all periodized and according to whatever my goal was, whatnot. But because my goal was hypertrophy over this winter block, a lot of training volume, a lot of sets, a lot of reps, etc., and I changed that structure to to calling it a 5-day plan, right? And so instead of calling it a 4-day plan with an optional day 5, I had 5 days, and there was a bit more work in the 5th day. But I found that I was constantly chasing my tail for the whole month of November, because I knew I had a holiday coming up at the end of November. I knew that we were taking a break in the gym near the end of December. So all those kind of other factors were coming into play, and I had to get more extra work done and get work done before I went away on holidays, that kind of stuff. And I was completely run down before I left for our holiday to Canada at the end of November. Came back from that, continued on with the plan, didn't fully recover, and now, as you can tell from my voice, I've been literally floored the last 2 weeks, the whole of Christmas basically, because just doing too much. But when I look back on it, I didn't enjoy it as much either. Every session was fecking way harder than it needed to be because I wasn't fully recovered, I wasn't sleeping enough, I was stressing about that, even though I didn't know I was stressing about it, but when I look back, I was. And it mightn't seem like a big change because I was still getting 5 days in anyway, but telling myself now that it's changed, I have to get in that 5th day and there's a bit more work in it, it started stressing me out that little bit more. And if I missed a session, it would mean that I have to catch up on it then the following week, and that's why that 5-week training block nearly went all the way up until late December, because I missed a couple of weeks here and there or whatnot. But again, it's doing something that's manageable for you over time. And I think even when I talk to a lot of people like yourself, Carter, in the podcast about what changes can people make, it's all well and good making these changes, like small little activity hacks here and there, and getting more active for people that are beginning, or people that are, even if you're consistent with gym work right now, you're happy with that, adding these activity kind of hacks, will say, out to that is going to be a big plus. Same goes with the nutrition. If you track your nutrition, if you're someone that doesn't like technology, if you don't like technology, you probably won't listen to this podcast. But if somebody, they didn't want to track, my FitnessPal, when people go tracking their food, they understand, right, there's an app out there for it. My FitnessPal is usually what's used. We use it with a lot of our clients. But we also use physical food logs as well and get them to write it down. Certain times they eat what they have, and there's different ways we do that, depending on the client, because we'll have some clients that writing too much into a food log will stress them out. So we might start them off by giving, I know it's not going to be as accurate, but at least they're getting something down on paper. What's the knock-on effect of that? It's going to get them more mindful. It's going to get them probably drinking more water anyway. It's probably going to get them more structured with their meals. It's probably going to get them eating 2 or 3 less takeaways a week. Simple stuff that adds up over time. But what I'm getting at is, while all that's well and good, a lot of it comes back to the fact as well, though, like, for people to really bring it up a gear and progress to the next level, I do think that they need a coach. But obviously we are coaches, we know that, we can see we can see the benefits of that over time. But I think something we can forget about that too when I'm interviewing people, is that we can give away as many tips as we want, but a lot of it will come down to you're probably going to hit a wall eventually at some level, that you need a coach to help you get to that next kind of step. You
either need like a coach, or you need you have to be like obsessed with it, in a sense. Like, it's funny how most people no one's just like accidentally incredibly fit. That's like, unless they're like a genetic freak, they're not just accidentally, crazy lean and muscular or crazy fit with like a, whatever, and very strong. Like, they either, like you said, have hired a coach or have like a mentor that they've worked with, or they are, have found that through reading about other people, right? And they're crazy motivated. Like, they spend their free time learning, right? And then not everybody has the time to do that or the desire to do that. And so I agree. And there have even been periods of my life where I've had, whether it's a business coach or I've even had a fitness coach at one point, not because I didn't know what the heck I was doing, but because I was in a period where I was getting more into powerlifting. And like, I just knew that, one, it was going to hold me accountable, but two, it was going to help me, what I was getting was, it was helping me cut a lot of corners, in a sense, or I guess not cut corners, but just more accelerate through the learning experience, right? And getting me to what I actually needed to know.
Yeah, of course. Like, with one of our coaches in the gym, Oshin, like the last 4 months, he was just kind of, not that he was missing workouts, that kind of stuff. Well, he kind of was. I don't want to hang him out to dry here, but he wasn't as consistent as he would like, and it was getting him pissed off basically. And I said, look, I'll just handle things. I'll handle all your programming. We'll sit down properly as if you're a client each month. We'll go through it all, and we did that for the last 4 months. And his training probably has been the best it's been in a couple of years, like, you know. And for him, that's a massive kind of plus, because now he doesn't have to think about what programming to do, this, that, and the other, and he just does it. He follows it. He can't cut corners because I'll be on his case. We've it all tracked, etc., etc. But again, you have the accountability from the coach. You're taking away the guesswork. You're taking away all that added stress of having to think about what to do and everything else. And there definitely will be periods as well where I go back and I'll probably get a coach. I use Robbie, the other coach at the gym, for a lot of my training throughout the year as well when it comes to power and performance stuff, because that's his gig. And I don't bother going really deep into performance stuff because I know I have Robbie there to help me with it, so I can get past all that learning stuff. Mm-hmm. Do you know, because obviously time needs to be spent up front if you really want to understand it inside out completely. And like you said, we're accelerating the learning process for a lot of people as well. But I think, yeah, look, it's a point that needs to be raised more often too as well, because not everyone is a Carter, you know. Not everyone is going to be, not to say obsessed, but not everyone's going to become a fucking fitness trainer or personal trainer, whatever it might be, because a lot of people follow fitness influential people online, whatever you want to call them, but they need to realize that they're not going to be them. You want to have fitness and training and nutrition as a part of your life that adds to it, not fucking taken away from it. Like, so, yeah, I suppose that just popped into my head when we were talking, like, because we can get into so much stuff from here, but that point needs to be reminded at times as well. And like, but yes, Carter, your Instagram page, well, there's a lot of topics on there relating to all what we're talking about, but kind of a couple of the ones that people have some of the most problems with, I think, is just the mindset issues around things. Like, it's all well and good when we get started with gym work and we're getting some sort of consistency under our belt, and we know that things are going to take time. We know the patience has to be involved with all that. But what happens when we hit a bit of a blip? Like, if someone has a bad meal, if somebody misses 2 or 3 workouts in a row, if they miss a week, if they miss 2 weeks, if they binged all out one weekend, I think that derails a lot of people, and one day can turn into a month very easily. You have some fantastic stuff around that. I think, like, if I was to go onto your Instagram now and just scroll through, I could probably pick out 5 posts all kind of circling back to that one principle. But yeah, what would you, like, let's just use the example of a bad meal. What would you say to somebody, like, if they're getting bogged down because of a bad meal and the kind of like the fuck it mentality starts to set in? Where would you go with that?
So I think it might depend on the person, like how they respond. Some people respond well, like the science of it, like, okay, here's what happened. Some people just like, I mean, there's other things that work, but what I think is really powerful in that moment is to, and this has worked a lot with even clients I've had where they've had a bad meal. I'll say something like, the first thing I always say is like, you know, no one ever got fat from, you know, one bad meal. No one ever got skinny from one good meal, right? It's from what you do most of the time. But what I always say is like, okay, here, let's just do this, right? So you're down in the dumps right now, but I just want you to do this for me once. I want you to get back on track, and I just want you to like spend 3 days and see what happens. And if you can continue gaining weight or whatever, then you can call me an idiot, and we, you know, don't believe me ever again. Because usually it just takes that one, like seeing something happen once, seeing that you can have a bad meal or whatever they would call it, and getting back on track, and then seeing how the progress doesn't really change in the long run, right? And then they average out. That I think is powerful, because once you see that happens, then you're like, oh, okay, so that isn't bad. Because it's really demoralizing in that moment. But, you know, other than just saying, you know, because we can sit there and say all day long, you know, what you do most of the time matters most. And like, you know, it's one bad meal never defines you or whatever. And it's all just kind of smoke and mirrors and just words. People can't really take to heart, I think, until they actually go through it. And so like, I'm thinking of one client specifically who, when we started, would struggle with that. And especially in the beginning, she really struggled with having bad meals because she was almost self-sabotaging herself because she was trying to be so perfect that she would like stress. And so I normally don't implement like planned like cheat meals or anything like that, or whatever you would call them. I just call them lifestyle meals. But like with her, we did. I said once a week, I want you to do this, and I want you to know that I'm putting this into your plan. And I just wanted her just to see that she could do that and still be okay. And I said, if you do this, the only rule is you need to stay on track throughout the week, right? And if you can do this and whatever. And she did that, she got results, and then she started to, stress less about when she would have, worse meals and stuff. Because usually it's just people's responses to what they're seeing in their progress or in the mirror and how they feel right after one of those meals. I think that if you can just like push through it the first time and see it and just trust that trust whoever's telling you, it's not that big of a deal, because it's not, and just give it one try. Like, I think at that point, then you become almost like a believer in it. And then it's not as much of an issue. It's still always there, right? Because it can still make you angry, but it should never stop you from making the choices that are going to, move you in the right direction. So.
Yeah, of course. And it's education over time as well. Like as you said, you might start off with somebody tracking some food to start with, and then you're obviously trying to educate them about being in a deficit over time as well. But like for a lot of our clients as well, we get them to a stage it depends on the client. It depends on how fast they pick up things, and yourself. But it could be 4 weeks, could be 8 weeks, could be 12 weeks. Teach them about calorie balance across the week. If you want to have more on this day, you can. If you want to have more on the weekend, you can. It's not a cheat meal. It just means you're eating a bit more food. Nothing magic. Nothing bad. But once they realize that, they're like, oh, okay. It's like a revelation, and we've had to kind of take that word cheat meal out of a lot of our clients' heads as well, because they're sitting down thinking, because I've done so well now across the week, now I can sit down and cheat. And even that word itself, it's like, why should you need to cheat on your diet? Like, there's obviously a negative connotation attached to that. But no, 100%, they're fully on board, or fully in link with everything you're saying there. And I think that if more people understood that one thing is not going to undo everything, it just gives them a little bit more perspective to kind of push through. And it is easier said than done. And you probably know yourself, you need to be reminded of it yourself at times. And you probably maybe have your partner tell you that at times too, because I know I do. Like, sometimes if a couple of workouts are not going to plan, or you're not getting stronger, or some other factors or other aspects of life, it's like, Dave, relax, it's only 2 weeks in, or you have this time to do this. And it's you need to be reminded of it yourself, is basically what I'm trying to say. Even when people have the flu, for example, like myself, you're going to get over that. Like, it's not going to last for the whole second year. You're going to feel better within a few more days, and you'll be back in the gym. It's grand. Just being a week off in the gym is not going to undo 12 weeks being in the gym, So that one-liner sentence that you had there, what you do most of the time matters most. It is a powerful line, but again, at the same time, more people need to be reminded of it, and to have that perspective, I think, kind of nearly ingrained into them to see this stuff long term.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. That's totally it. That's why I say it all the time, and it probably gets annoying for my clients. But I think the more you can just embed that into your brain, the better.
Yeah, it's also why too. Like, I just wanted to have this episode just kind of like just chatting back and forth, because if for example, if I interviewed every single person asking the same stuff about calorie deficits, do this, it gets a bit repetitive and boring. And to be honest, a lot, like, the basics are boring really at the end of the day when you break it down. But hearing people's stories, hearing people's different viewpoints and different angles and things, that's where I think the real value comes, and it lets people know that, you're human at the end of the day, and you're not meant to be fucking perfect all the time. You're meant to mess up and know how to get past that and whatnot. And especially this time of year, I think people are so, how can I put the word? They're worried about the weight they might put on over Christmas, even if it's only a pound or two. It kind of it puts a negative spin in things for the word go in January, and then before they know it, they're 3 weeks in, they haven't done anything. And even some of our clients, like, they find it hard getting back into the gym the first week, and we have to give them a call, like, look, where are you? Get back in. What's happening? And they're off for a couple of weeks. They're letting the kind of negative sit in. They're like, oh, I find it very hard to get back on track. But a lot of the times it's just fucking show up. And once you show up, once you put on the shoes and put on your trainers and get in the gym, the rest is kind of history from there, because you're starting the momentum going again.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And I think also, and it's funny, and I see this a lot of times, is whenever you get rid of the perfection mindset and you embrace the I'm going to mess up, but I'm going to do my best mindset, it puts the control back in you. And I find that the clients who kind of embrace that actually end up being more consistent than the clients who try to be perfect, because it's this weird thing with humans and our psychology where we're in this mindset of, it's almost like self-sabotage. And And I think it always comes down to like the fear of change, because everyone, even if that change is going to be good, there's still a fear of becoming something different, because there's the unknown. What's that going to look like? Who am I going to be? Like, we like to be comfortable, even whenever that comfortability isn't necessarily optimal for our our lives in the long run. And so I think that people kind of embrace the fact that, listen, you're going to mess up, and that's okay, and you're always going to be that way. Like, that's where I think people, it honestly chills people out, and they feel more confident in themselves, and that builds more consistency, and they actually end up doing better than if they were to try to do everything perfectly to begin with.
Yeah, it's expectations. People expecting too much.
Yes, that's a good,
Yeah, before they even start. It's something that, like, we run 90-day kind of like goal setting blocks every year for our members as well, and I think a lot that's even changed over the last few years as well, because they're not so much goal setting workshops anymore. They're more like, right, you have a goal, great, but what is the habits and processes and things that need to be done to get to that goal in the first place? So they're nearly like habit workshops now at this stage. Getting people to focus on what you actually need to do to get to that goal, And I think a lot of that comes back to what you said as well. I think, I definitely seen you put it up somewhere recently anyway, and it just a simple note really on measuring your own progress when it comes to all this stuff as well. Measuring your own progress is based off you and no one else, and focusing on where you are now versus where you were a week ago, a month ago, 2 months ago, and knowing that is going to fucking take time as well. And I think, have you anything else to add to that though? Am I right in saying that? Was that, I can't remember where I've seen it now. Maybe it was a post, or maybe it was one of your stories.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. It was like, I think it was a post about like it was like you versus you or something. Trying to like compare. Oh, it was. I don't think I came up with it, but there is a quote that's like, don't compare like who you are today with, like, don't compare like don't compare somebody else's tomorrow to where you are today, or whatever, or I forget what it was. It was something like, don't compare your progress to what somebody else has already accomplished. Compare yourself where you are today versus where you were a week ago, or whatever, or in the past. Because it's really easy to like look at someone else's progress and just see the image, the before and after, and just be like, oh wow, how successful they were, without having any context of what they were doing and how long it took, or what they had to do to get there. And people can just get discouraged because, like, well, why am I not there? Why haven't I done that? And I think that's kind of just like a recipe for just disappointment, is if you're always trying to compare yourself to others, because we're all different. But I think the more you can really make this journey your own, and really the focus should always be on being 1% better each day. Like, you want to be the best version of yourself every day. That's what's going to allow you to eventually create the person who you're proud to be, right? Or make those changes that you're proud of, because it's the best that you could have put out. And I think that's literally all you can do, is just put out your best, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. And one way to look at that 1% better each day as well is, even for myself, I know some clients that I've had in the past, they used to get so fixated with on, constantly moving forward over, like, this is for people now that work consistent over a couple of years, when they weren't, making the same level of progress they were at the start. They nearly started getting bogged down in themselves. And it's kind of like, that 1% could also mean being happy with staying still for a couple of weeks or a couple of days as well. Not always being pressurized into thinking that everything has to be go as well at the same time. So it's funny that you bring up that point. I'm not trying to shoot down that 1% better, of course not, but it's also to let people know as well that, like, there's certain times of the year where down periods needs to come into play, and that's part of that, like Christmas time, having weeks off for holidays, that kind of stuff. But overall, how you measure yourself should be against yourself. And it's easy for me and you to say that as well, but you need to find lots of different ways to do that. And that's why habit formation, little routines you build for yourself, little mini wins in the gym, mini wins in your activity. There's so many ones you can do, and for you to kind of make sure that you're assessing those on some level, and probably celebrating them a little bit over time as well. It's one thing that I used to be very bad for myself, and just to give yourself a fucking pat in the back every now and then. If you achieve something, if you're doing something new that you haven't done before, if you see a lot of visual progress, if you see X amount of progress you've tracked, celebrate the fucking thing. Yeah, have you anything else to add in that, Carter, before we wrap things up? Am I waffling a little bit?
I know. No, dude, I think because that's what it's always going to come back to. And it's really, I think, for people, it's, everyone's going to get there with the same tools and the same principles, but it's important to like understand that you're different and everyone's different. And the more true you stay to yourself and the more that you can make this something that you is your focus, like you're focused on improving yourself and you're not worried about what other people are doing or what's working for other people. If what you're doing is working for you and you're enjoying it and you're growing from it, like that's all that matters. And I think that's how you become successful. Like it's whenever it's honestly, it's about taking ownership of your body and your health. And then knowing that once you take that ownership, you know that you do want to take care of it and it is important to you. And so that is the type of, it goes past motivation and it almost becomes like a duty, like a responsibility to take care of yourself because, you can't do anything else without that. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think it always does come back to just, finding why you want to do this, like that inner why, and then holding on to that because that's what's going to carry you through, especially through the times when it's not easy.
Fantastic. No, a nice way to wrap things up because I think if I stay going anymore, my brain is just going to get fried.
Yeah, you need to have a warm glass of milk and go to bed. You're like tucked into bed or something. You're like, you take care of yourself.
And Carter, probably a lot of what we talked about is there's so many lessons and kind of principles we've talked about. But one thing that I like to wrap up New Year episodes with is, what would you say is the biggest lesson that you've taken from 2018?
Man, 2018. I think for me, I think it's important I would say it's important to put yourself out there, want to grow in certain ways. I know that for me, I'm very much like a hermit. In terms of like, I've always kind of just stuck to myself and not really asked for help or learn anything new. But, this year specifically, I've, especially since like the summer, I've spent a lot more time, in business, they'd be calling it networking, but like I'm saying, actually talking to people more and reaching out and honestly saying yes to doing podcasts, right. And doing things like that. It's so important to get other people's perspective on things because, to a degree, you're going to be stuck in your own head. And I think that the more that you can build relationships with others, that's what's going to allow you to grow beyond what your own capacity is. And so I would just say that whether you're introverted or extroverted, however you identify, just this year I really learned the importance of having a tribe around you and having people around you who care for you and you can grow from and learn from and everything like that. Because, obviously that's important for fitness, but also everything else in life. So.
With you 100% on that. Yeah, it's probably something that as in Doc Fitness and the coaches that are in there, we've seen probably the most this year is the community that the members have made amongst themselves. Like a lot of them have kind of bonded a lot together and you can see them doing stuff together now outside the gym, but it makes their life a lot easier when it comes to the training side of things, the nutritional side of things, even simple stuff like sharing recipes and that kind of stuff, because they have a support system there as well with them and they see things in different perspectives and different lights. And no, I'm with you 100% on that. Fantastic. Carter, I must say thank you very much for coming on and listening to my man flu head, as I put it. No, I appreciate it, buddy, and hopefully there's a lot of takeaways there for people. And Happy New Year.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for having me on.
So guys, hopefully you enjoyed that style of an episode. I'm not sure if you noticed a bit of a difference, but again, it was more of a general chat just to see Carter's story and the transformation that he went through and kind of where it took us from there. And as you can see from it, there's definitely a lot of takeaways in that. And if anything, just for my own takeaway to round up this episode is, if you are planning on implementing small or big changes this year, just take the fucking things slow. Don't be trying to change so much things at once. And as Carter said as well, learn from stuff that you've done in the past. If you've done something in the past and it hasn't worked out, and especially if you've done that again and again, what's the point in trying that again? Take a different route, take a different perspective on things, take a different angle on things, and realize that the small things that you do change over time, they will compound into big, massive things over time. And that's probably the biggest key takeaway we want you to get from this. And probably the last thing just to say before I go is if you want to follow Carter, his main kind of place is over on Instagram, which is at Carter Good, and as always his links will be over in the show notes page anyway. And thank you for tuning in. I hope 2019 is a great year for you, and we shall chat to you soon. Bye bye.